Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you all for coming today. I want to thank our village trustees for joining us today. Trustee Katsinas, Trustee Radishevsky, Trustee Milani, Trustee Healy, and Trustee Compass. So thank you very much for joining us, and I'd like to welcome you all. At this point, can we post the colors?
Left, right.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order.
At this point, I would like to introduce Don Borling, who is the pastor of All Saints Lutheran Church, a position he has held for the last 47 years. He's also the chaplain of the Orland Park Police Department.
Let us pray. Lord, we call you by many names, and we come from all kinds of religions. Today, there's only one religion that matters. It's a religion born of kindness, generosity of spirit, and the incredible courage to face all the obstacles before us. 20 years ago, a journey that began with a vicious attack and ignited in our country a spirit of coming together and honoring all those who lost so much and whose lives would never be the same. Every name, every memory, every ounce of goodwill and courage and devotion, it all lives in the heart and soul of each one of us today. May that spirit that brought us together 20 years ago, may that spirit be rekindled in us today. We are a country united, in some ways divided. We are a country of hope, and yet many people feel like they're barely hanging on to hope. Lord, may what we remember today be a launching pad for renewed commitment to what our flag stands for. To those who gave us hope 20 years ago, from the ashes of despair to a spirit of freedom and goodness that will never die, we will never forget you, and we will always honor you by recommitting ourselves to the sacred calling of what our country stands for. Amen.
Before I introduce all of our many speakers today, I would like to thank you all for coming. I would also like to thank all of our distinguished visitors who I didn't get to meet, who are here today, all of our firefighters and our police officers that are here. We all have unique memories of 9/11. By the way, you can sit down. We all have unique memories of 9/11. It is one of those days that everyone will remember where they were at for the rest of their lives. For me, That day started with a train ride into the city and a walk to my office at 311 South Wacker Drive, which is across the street from the Sears Tower. As I walked in, the news was on, and I was told that a plane had hit the World Trade Center. Within a minute of that, while watching the news, I watched the second plane hit, and I knew we were under attack. Then came another one at the Pentagon. Somewhere amidst all of this, the city was evacuated. This was a sight to behold. Hundreds of thousands of people packed into the train stations with train after train lined up. At the same time, F-16 circled overhead while rumors swirled around the crowd. Like all of us, I have many personal stories, and those from people close to me that day. A coworker whose brother-in-law worked at Cantor Fitzgerald and died near the top of the World Trade Center. A former colleague who was in Building 7 and while evacuating personally witnessed the carnage. Colleagues who were stranded all over the country for several days as their airplanes were forced to land all over the country. A colleague who missed a flight out of Boston that ultimately saved his life. Friends I flew with in the Air Force that were still in were called into the squadron as real weapons were loaded on F-15Es and were scrambled over the East Coast and over Washington, D.C. with the orders, if it flies, it dies. Think about that for a minute. Let that sink in. U.S. military officers with live missiles flying over the United States with orders to kill anything still flying. That's surreal. I also remember the next day when a distraught young co-worker who recently graduated from college asked me why I was not affected or did not appear to be affected by the events of the previous 24 hours. My response was that I was pissed off because we were attacked again, but that I had experienced this anger before due to other terrorist attacks on Americans in America. For example, Beirut, the World Trade Center previously, and more recently to that day, Khobar Towers, where I had lived for 6 months while deployed, and the USS Cole. This was not something new. It just happened on our home turf. So many emotions that come flooding back if you go to any of the 3 memorials. If you have not gone to these memorials, I recommend that you do so, and don't ever forget what happened that day. Rather than the sorrow and the pain, I prefer to remember the good that came out of those terrible events. America came together. Our differences were put aside, and we focused on the shared experiences of being an American. Democrats and Republicans worked together for the common good of all Americans. Think of how we're behaving now. We're being divided over a silly piece of cloth because people are afraid. On 9/11, people were also afraid. They were afraid that we were under attack. Yet our evacuation out of Chicago was orderly. It was not chaotic. People helped one another. Ordinary people did extraordinary things. Firefighters and police officers ran into the World Trade Center to try to save lives, costing many of them their own lives. On Flight 93, ordinary Americans learned that the hijacked planes were being used as weapons. In a matter of minutes, they took action with the famous words, "Let's roll." They sacrificed their own lives to save others. Ordinary people found ways to help thousands of people that were stranded in strange cities and airports throughout the country. People helped people get out of New York City safely and get to their homes many miles away. Thousands of people traveled to New York City to help search through the rubble to help find survivors. Hundreds of thousands of young men and women from all walks of life joined the military to fight the war on terror, feeling it was their patriotic duty. Many of these young men and women gave their lives fighting this war, but make no mistake, these efforts were not in vain. They saved lives and thwarted many other attacks. Since the beginning of America, we have been a nation filled with ordinary people doing extraordinary things. The Declaration of Independence was signed by 56 men, most of whom you have never heard of, but they risked everything to create this incredible nation. Harriet Tubman escaped slavery and established the Underground Railroad, saving the lives of hundreds of men and women and children. Audie Murphy, a 5'5" son of sharecroppers, became the most decorated soldier of World War II. Neil Armstrong, the son of an auditor, became the first man to walk on the moon. Ronald Reagan, born in an apartment in Tampico, Illinois, and a B-movie actor, became, in my opinion, the best president of my lifetime. America is the one country on earth where people can come from the most modest of circumstances to be anything, including president. Many of these ordinary American heroes live even closer to home. Orland Park resident Pat McBrien saved 3 unconscious family members in a home as a member of the Brookfield Fire Department. Just this year, Orland Park resident Mary Casper, a nurse at Northwestern Palos Hospital, saved a woman's life at Andrew High School's graduation by performing CPR and rendering aid with another nurse. Former Police Chief Timothy McCarthy took a bullet, shielding President Reagan. Officer Carrie Kelly Vallon risked her own life to stop a teenager from jumping off a parking garage. Undoubtedly, you will hear many great speeches today, remembering 9/11 and the heroic actions taken that day. But if we remember anything from 9/11, I hope we remember that 9/11 brought us together and revealed our greatest strength, our people. I hope we remember our common bonds as Americans, and that America is built on ordinary Americans doing extraordinary things. Thank you. At this time, I would like to introduce Chief Michael Schofield. Chief Schofield has been a resident of Orland Park for nearly 50 years. 38 of those years have been spent with his wife Kathy, raising 6 children and now 1 grandson. He has been a firefighter in Orland Park since 1986. Prior to this, he was with the Chicago Fire Department, where he received the Award of Valor for a Special Operations Rescue. He has been involved in special operations and rescue his entire career, including teaching special operations across the state. He's a charter member of the Illinois Urban Search and Rescue Team, Task Force 1. He co-founded the Combined Agency Response Team, the largest rescue team capable of responding to a building collapse in Illinois. He has also been the Orland Fire Protection District's fire chief since 2015. Please welcome Chief Schofield.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everyone. Step back. I'm going to talk a little bit about how 9/11 affected Orland Fire. So we'll go back to the early 1990s. Orland Fire was one of the first departments in the state of Illinois to start doing building collapse rescue. Back in 1997, after going to classes all over the country, we found that we were meeting up with several New York firefighters through these classes. In 1998, we were able to have 5 New York City firefighters come out to Orland Park and teach not only Orland Fire, but the region's rescue team building collapse. Now, New York City has the most building collapses in the United States. Mostly because they have old buildings, and a lot of people try to take the brick from these old buildings and reuse them, which kind of causes collapses sometimes. So on 9/11, it was a Tuesday, and we were at our monthly rescue meeting, and we watched buildings collapse. Now, to a firefighter, initially when we saw the plane crash into the first building, and we saw the magnitude of the fire, and we watched our brothers and sisters respond to that incident, we knew this was going to be the toughest fight that these firefighters ever had. And then the second plane hit. And we knew Like the mayor said, this was a terrorist attack. Talking to some New York firefighters that survived and came out, they knew that the chances of them coming out of the building uninjured were very slim. And the firefighters that went in there also knew that there was a good chance they would never come out alive. But they had the passion for the service, and they did their job. So going back to 1997, 98, when New York came in, they stayed here in Orland with us for 5 days. They taught us everything they learned about building collapse. We were able to get a building in Homer Glen. The New York City guys collapsed it. They taught us how to tunnel in. We tunneled through concrete, we tunneled through a foundation, we went inside, we shored up, and we rescued. 5 days of training that we'll never forget. On the 4th day of training, there was an explosion and fire in Lockport. Several firefighters were trapped and injured. The guys from New York City jumped on the rigs with us in Orland as we responded out to Lockport. And it's that passion and courage that we tell our young firefighters you need to have. They said, there's firefighters hurt, there's firefighters trapped, we're going, and there's nothing you can do to stop us. And we didn't. We invited them with us. And we went out to Lockport, and we helped the fire department in Lockport do some shoring up in the buildings that had collapsed in a natural gas explosion. So when 9/11 happened, we were truly concerned because the 5 firefighters that were in Orland were some of the best in New York City. Matter of fact, they were instructors at the New York Fire Academy. We were sad to learn that 2 of those firefighters died. Lieutenant Tim Higgins was the lead instructor here in Orland. His father was a retired fire captain in New York City. His 2 brothers were on the fire department, and his 1 brother was a police officer. Lieutenant Higgins was assigned to a squad company. Upon arrival to the North Tower, they were given the assignment to go upstairs and attempt rescues. They made it to the 20th floor when they encountered several people trapped in an elevator. They cut through the wall, rescued 9 people from the elevator, and we know this because one of the people he rescued had the same last name of Higgins. So that story was shared with his family. After that rescue, they proceeded upstairs. They got to the 37th floor when the evacuation notice came over the air. All firefighters evacuate the building. At that same time, Rescue Company 1, which was the most elite company in New York City, sent out a mayday. Mayday means firefighters trapped, we need help. Timmy's company, Squad 252, ignored the evacuation notice and continued up. Unfortunately, a couple minutes later, the building collapsed. Tim was found with his crew 2 weeks later, which brought some solace to the family because he was one of the few firefighters that were found that were recognizable. And they were found not too far away from the company that was given the mayday. The second person we knew was the deputy chief of New York City. His name was Ray Downey. Ray Downey is known in the fire service as the father of building collapse. We had many classes with Ray. We sat many hours and talked. Ray died in the command post. He organized the rescue. He refused to leave the command post. And when that command post, when that building collapsed, the second building collapsed, it collapsed on the command post, taking out the deputy chief and the chief of the New York City Fire Department, who both said, we are not leaving our command post. We are not leaving our firefighters. Shows the commitment. Because of what happened on 9/11, the fire service has changed forever. The Orland Fire District is recognized regionally and nationally as one of the top rescue organizations in the state. If you go by our training facility, it's the top regional training facility in the state of Illinois. And that's all because of what happened on 9/11. 343 of our brothers and sisters were killed doing their job. After that, there was a dramatic change in funding for firefighters, funding for rescue. We developed rescue teams. We developed grant funding. And if you look at what we have in Orland, it is a direct result of our brothers and sisters being killed. It's not that we weren't prepared. We were prepared. We weren't as organized as we should have been across the nation. We didn't have the, excuse me, a couple paramedics come up. Yeah. Obviously standing here in the sun will take its toll. But we have today what we have because of the people that died. Every firefighter, paramedic, police officer, and person on that plane on 9/11 woke up that day going to work, not thinking that by 10 o'clock every one of them would be dead. We recognized everybody that died on 9/11, not just the firefighters. At this time, I'm going to bring up Lieutenant Dave Nagel. Lieutenant Nagel is in charge of our honor guard. Lieutenant Dave Nagel is a 30-year veteran of the Orland Fire District. Lieutenant Dave Nagel received numerous commendations throughout his career here in Orland. He is the commander of the Orland Local 2754 Honor Guard. He's one of our original founding members. Lieutenant Dave Nagel serves as the captain of our drill team. And Lieutenant Dave Nagel is really about to retire in a couple of years. We're going to miss him and his commitment to the fire district and to our honor guard. At this time, I'd ask everybody to rise as we perform the most solemn ceremony of the fire service.
The fire service is steeped in many traditions, some hundreds of years old. One of such traditions is the sounding of a bell. In the past, the bell has signaled the start of each shift. Throughout the day and night, each alarm was sounded by a bell. When the fire was out and the alarm was over, it was the bell that signaled that they made it home. Today we use the bell as a symbol of honor and respect for those who have served. We sound the bell 3 times, 3 rings each, to represent the end of our brothers and sisters' duties. And so for those who have selflessly given their lives for their fellow men and women, their tasks have been completed, their duties are done. To our fallen brothers and sisters, we ring out their last alarm. They are finally going home.
Thank you, everybody. You can be seated. Mr. Mayor?
I would now like to introduce Chief Joseph Mitchell. Chief Joe Mitchell is a 26-year veteran of the Orland Park Police Department. He received his Bachelor's of Science degree from Lewis University and a Master's degree from Nepal. In 2018, he graduated from the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia. Chief Mitchell has held numerous posts in Orland Park Police Department, including head of investigations and deputy chief. He has also spearheaded several interagency task forces. Chief Mitchell has been Orland Park's police chief since 2020. Please welcome Chief Joe Mitchell.
Good morning. For those old enough to remember that sunny Tuesday morning in September of 2001, the words 9/11 will forever invoke a vivid memory of those where you were at and what you were doing. When you learn of the greatest terrorism attack ever to occur on American soil, America changed forever that day. Our world was also changed forevermore. Almost 3,000 lives perished before 11 a.m. on September 11th, 2001, by calculated and barbaric acts of hatred by extremists that despise what America stands for and all that we represent. Every year on September 11th, Americans unite to honor the memory of those lives tragically cut short, and thus we observe a moment of silence as a tribute to those souls and the void left behind in the hearts of the people they touched. On this date, 20 years ago, in a time of insurmountable despair, unspeakable horror and tragedy, America witnessed, as the mayor said, ordinary people performing extraordinary acts of courage, gallantry, and showed tremendous compassion for others, even those not known to them. Ladies and gentlemen, it's always the darkest before the dawn. Many of these extraordinary people were first responders who answered the call, who never, ever wavered in their commitment. They conquered their fears and fulfilled their mission to protect life, even if it meant sacrificing their own. It is a brave soul who runs towards danger without concern for his or her own safety. They entered those burning Twin Towers not knowing if they would ever return home or have the opportunity to say goodbye to their loved ones, in an attempt to save thousands and thousands of innocent lives trapped within. They have earned our undying gratitude, and America should never, ever forget their sacrifices. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "The ultimate measure of a person is not when he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but rather where he stands at times of challenges and controversy." No truer words can be spoken for these first responders' duty and loyalty to their noble profession. It is in the face of danger when the finest among us rise to the challenge. Their story, that of the 343 firefighters, 60 police officers, and 8 paramedics who lost their lives in a final act of heroism and self-sacrifice for the betterment of society, must never be forgotten. It was recently reported over 30,000 lives were saved as a result of the actions of first responders that day. For their story, on that fateful day in 2001, is in fact America's story, one of perseverance over good over evil, to never ever surrender to hate, to stand tall in the face of adversity and overwhelming odds. It is our responsibility, ladies and gentlemen, to make sure their story, America's story, should be ever told to the countless generations to come, for they represent the very best of what this country, the land of the free, the home of the brave, stands for. We should never forget. Thank you.
It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce retired commander of the U.S. Navy, Joel Van Essen. Joel is our current Director of Public Works and retired commander in the United States Navy. Joel is a native of Chicago, Illinois, and a graduate of the University of Illinois with a degree in architecture. Following this, he was commissioned as an ensign in the United States Navy and was part of the Civil Engineering Corps, otherwise known as the Seabees. Joel's long career in the Navy includes 2 tours in Afghanistan, for which I would personally like to thank him for. He was a Seabee Combat Warfare qualified, and he is a Bronze Star recipient. On 9/11, then Lieutenant Van Essen was the resident officer in charge of construction at Norfolk Navy Shipyard in Portsmouth, Virginia, which, for those of you who don't know, is a few minutes from Washington, D.C. for the Navy F-15 stationed there at the time. Please welcome retired Commander Joel Van Essen.
As a retired Navy Seabee, we remember Pearl Harbor's attack with words in our song. We are the Seabees of the Navy. We can build and we can fight. We'll pave the way to victory and guard it day and night. And we promise that we'll always remember the 7th of December. We're the Seabees of the Navy, bees of the 7 seas. Today, we remember another attack on our great nation 20 years ago, on September 11, 2001. While the attack on Pearl Harbor was a nation that we knew, and it was an attack on our military, September 11th was an attack by a little-known terrorist group on our civilian population. The terrorists tried to attack what we all believe, our legacy of freedom, justice, and liberty. At 9:37 a.m., 5 Saudi hijackers with Al-Qaeda crashed American Airlines Flight 77, carrying 59 passengers, including 6 crew members, into the western side of the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. The flight left Dulles and en route to Los Angeles. And over Ohio, the hijackers took control and turned the plane around back towards D.C. The airplane flew over the Navy Annex building adjacent to the Arlington National Cemetery and crashed into the Pentagon, severely damaging the 3 outmost sections of the Pentagon, 5 rings that has over 18,000 workers, and caused a very large fire. Rescue efforts began immediately after the crash, that led initially by military and civilians within the building, but shortly after by brave firefighters from Arlington, Fort Myer, and the Reagan National Airport. While they extinguished the fires, they avoided collapsing buildings around them, and the firefighters continued to put out small fires for several days. Today, we gather to remember and not forget those brave first responders who put their lives on the line that day. The 5 hijackers' actions also killed 184 personnel. 59 of the personnel were in the plane, and another 125 military and civilians that worked for the Navy and the Army, the Office of Secretary of Defense, and the Defense Intelligence Agency. Those killed were like you and I. They were parents, sons, daughters, brothers and sisters, spouses, and even children in the plane. They all had hopes and dreams, and they had families that loved them dearly. Let us not forget the families that had to deal with the loss, and all those that were wounded as well. The damaged sections of the Pentagon were really quickly rebuilt in 2002, and includes a small memorial and a chapel in the building to remember those who died. The 184 victims of the attack were also memorialized outside in a park adjacent to the crash site that contains a bench for each victim, arranging according to their year of birth from 1930 to 1998. So today, we gather today to remember and not forget those victims and those families. While I was not at the Pentagon, like the mayor mentioned, I served in the military at the time, and later in my career, I did work at the Pentagon with the Assistant Secretary of Navy for Installations and Environment. And I saw the repairs, and I saw the Memorial Park. When I served at the Crane Navy base in Indiana, one of my public works employees was actually at the Pentagon when it happened. She was my financial officer in the public works. And she described the terrifying impact of the noise, the fire, and the terrible thick smoke that smelled terrible as she tried to evacuate the building. The terrorists' deluded attempt to assault our spirit failed, and our nation's response reveals that the spirit of freedom is as strong as ever. Throughout the course of American history, courageous military men and women have taken up arms to secure and defend our legacy of freedom, justice, and liberty. Our troops, along with the State Department and the Agency for International Development, are overseas to defeat instability and terrorism. Those troops follow the footsteps of the 48 million men and women who, since our nation's founding, have stepped towards and against evil, defend our way of life, and to spread freedom for others. I served 2 tours in Afghanistan. Each were about a year long, where I helped rebuild Afghanistan and provide mentorship and advice to the government leaders so they could govern on their own accord. I built a commando base, police stations, repaired schools, hospitals, repaired roads for them, dug wells, installed water turbines in the Panjshir Valley, where the Taliban right now are trying to get in. And those turbines are providing electricity to those villages. And I even installed solar streetlights in the city of Kabul. I can tell you, those that served with me and those of the families who may have lost a loved one, that no matter what happens recently, that every sacrifice we made over there made a difference to the generation. They didn't have freedom, and we also held those who had the mastermind of this accountable. I can assure you that our military service today represents our resolute dedication to achieve a lasting peace, and they will not let our nation down. Today, we gather and not forget our veterans who have fought the global war on terrorism, those who have been wounded, those who have died, and those current men and women in the armed forces who are serving. So, for the victims and the families, for the first responders, and for the armed forces, we gather today to remember and never forget. Thank you.
Lieutenant Nagel, please retire the colors.
Flag detail. 10. Hook. Flags to the carry. Ready? Ready. Right. Face. Forward. Lock.
I want to thank you all for attending today. We will never forget, and united we stand. Thank you. Thank you. That concludes the program.